Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Driven Leadership Podcast. It's 2025. We're here, we're ready, and we're starting the new year off with a pretty intense month, I'd say, but I'm really excited about the episodes that we're going to start rolling out. We thought at the beginning of the year it would be pretty applicable to focus on mindset as we all set goals for our business and in our personal lives here at the beginning of the year. Mindset plays a big factor into whether or not those goals actually become reality. And the biggest thing in the way of those goals can sometimes be your own mindset, whether or not you're feeling like you're an imposter, if you have growth versus fixed mindset, how to handle change, especially in your business, but also in your personal life. So we put together these episodes over the next couple of weeks that we're going to be rolling out on just those things. And we're starting this week with part 1 of our imposter episodes. So what is imposter syndrome? How do we here at Driven, on the Driven team, deal with imposter syndrome? What are the specific types that you may identify with? And this will be a two-parter. So we go through the first few in this first episode and the next few in the next episode. And then after that, we have a couple of amazing episodes with CEO, with an athletic coach about mindset and change in an athletic team and in a company. So enjoy this first episode about imposter syndrome. It was recorded right before the holidays, so we mentioned some Santa and Christmas stuff at the beginning. Hopefully that doesn't throw you off your New Year's mindset here. Yeah, here's our first episode about imposter syndrome. Enjoy. Welcome back to the Driven Leadership Podcast, everybody. We're excited to be back with you today. We're talking about imposter syndrome. We're going to jump straight into it. And no, we were just joking before, this is not an episode for the mall Santas out there this time of year who are just day in and day out being a full-on imposter, not only as as just a completely made-up individual. Hopefully you're also not listening to this too loud in your kitchen with your kids around.
Why
Hold
you
on,
do it?
hold on.
I didn't know.
Whoa.
Band-Aid did you just rip off?
And also, Santa is a real person.
Real.
Santa is.
Real.
For sure real. You don't believe, you don't receive, Connor. You will receive nothing for Christmas.
You
And I
will
hope
get
your day
coal.
sucks.
You will get coal in your socks.
This is
Straight
my
naughty
policy on Santa. We do the whole Santa thing, but he only gives a couple gifts. I make sure that my kids know. No, Mom and Daddy bought.
Oh,
this
you
for
need credit for it.
Oh, yeah.
I don't
So-
like
So
Santa's the
you're
best
jealous
thing.
of Santa because
I'm
Santa
not
hooks him up
jealous.
better.
I'm making sure I get what I am given.
Hear that?
So my problem is you're living in imposter syndrome by having to provide gifts that Santa provides. And that's a problem.
I'm fighting the imposter syndrome, and that's what we're talking about today. Eric asked for the top of the episode. He's got some data and some facts to spit out.
Well, we get there. The only reason I was jumping into it is because I can honestly say, especially throughout my career, dealing with this full force, right? So just defining it in general, and I'm sure there's a technical definition out there I could look up, but for me, imposter syndrome is coming in, especially as a leadership and business consultant and all these things. And I started that in my 20s. I mean, it was like I was training and developing people in my 20s, and I was like, the hell do I know? And it's so that to me has always been the definition. It's like I'm stepping into something and I'm acting as an expert when I don't truly feel that way. And the interesting thing that I learned over the years, and now being the ripe old age of 35, it has gotten to where
Times 2, 1.5.
I was about to say, is he 70?
Wow.
right, she just made me 70. Thanks. So, no, I got a birthday coming up. I'm coming up on 52, and crazy thing, somewhere in the last, I don't know, 10 years, somewhere in there, a lot of this started to shift. And it's interesting because if you go back to when I was in my 20s, and I was talking back then. I was teaching sales and leadership and other things, but I still had more information just because I'd read some books. But it was like, I had some, but I didn't feel it. I wasn't owning it, and and so living with that, I feel like I can relate with this one. I guess is where I'm coming from. But
Yeah.
but I want to tell, and it just kind of where this came from or where my thoughts were around it is that, and it has a lot to do with our story around Driven, and when we started Driven, so this is 2010, and we're coming out of a recession or kind of in a recession, and all this stuff is going on, and we had a chance to buy a company or to open a brand new company, and we're like, you know what, we're gonna toss the cookies down and we're gonna open our own company. And in doing that, it immediately kind of thrust us in a position of, oh no, we are business owners and we are experts in running business because we're experts in leadership. And by the way, those are two very, very different things.
Yeah.
And yet we didn't understand the difference. And so when I walk in, and I've always been fascinated with business, and I walk in and I felt like I was supposed to act like I was an expert. And every time I acted like an expert, it didn't feel authentic. It didn't feel genuine. I had a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety around it, added extra pressure. And then when we started our first immersive program, our advanced programs, it was actually a class called Leadership Foundation, which later became Forge. And it is an awesome class. I mean, it really is. And even back then, our first rendition, I still remember the people that were in that class because they're still in our lives. They're still clients of ours. And it was an incredible class. But I got to tell you, I'm standing up there and we're talking about things, and I'm sitting there and I'm going, God, I don't even know how we're going to pay the bills,
Right.
to do this. Like, we're running this. We got to pay these people at the end of it. I hope that payment comes through to be able to afford to pay. Like,
Oh,
that's
and by
where
the
we
way,
were.
we really hope this process works because we've just done research and we've created some of our own. And oh my God, please let it work.
Right. So that whole training, and still the process we use in the beginning, for those that have taken it, you know what I'm talking about. But at the very beginning of this, the very first process is pretty much the exact opposite of any process we'd ever delivered before. And so we're opening this thing up and we're like, well, I remember Mary and I both looking at each other, and I'm like, well, we'll see what the hell happens. Do we really? And just so being overwhelmed with this doubt of, are you enough? Are we? And you kind of, in a way, be put in these positions where you got to step into it. And crazy enough, most of the time, you're enough. But the internal dialogue and the stress and the pressure and the things that go on around that are pretty overwhelming. So I did do a little research before this, and I ran across a website.
Before we get into that, I want to hear
okay.
Mary and Austin's experience. Obviously, Mary, part of
It's
that.
not all about me.
not this episode.
Oh, okay.
Those I send you to record by yourself, and they definitely go out. All of them have gone out. No, obviously part of that Forge. That Forge story is part of your story, Mary. But what's your personal experience with dealing with and your involvement of this, imposter syndrome?
Oh my gosh. So I didn't go to college. Didn't have a college degree, and in my life, I was, mom early. Was always the top of my class. Actually graduated with a 3.93 in high school.
Come on.
Smart. I know. I was smart.
I
hard
did not,
worker.
I did not do that.
Yeah. And I would make things happen. So that was just me. If I wanted something to happen, I'd make things happen. Well, I get into the leadership realm, and now they're having me teach leadership. And that's where it really showed up, is I would have companies. I had a CEO from a Fortune 100 company in my class. 100 company. Have multiple business owners, government, and I'm teaching them leadership. And that's where the imposter syndrome, I was panicking. What if someone asked me my degree, the letters behind my name? And we laugh because I have Maryisms. I talk funny at times. And to me, it makes sense. But to other people, it's like, you don't know what you're saying. And I actually said there was a word I used in one of the trainings, and it was one of the business owners who looked at me, goes, that's not how you say it. And all the fear of I'm not enough, I
Just
don't
came
have the skill set,
crashing down. Yeah.
came crashing down. And so, and this, it cycled. So even when we started Driven, I was terrified that someone asked me what my degree was.
Mm.
I'm in colleges teaching college athletes about leadership and of course, whatever you're afraid of will show up. Well, what's your background? What's your degree? And I'm like, oh my God. Finally, it was just like, I have a life degree. Something shifted along the way when we really worked with Driven for probably, it was about 5-6 years. And I had actually hired a coach as well. And it was people, the right people who believe like you believe, to Simon Sinek's point, they're not going to care. Yes, I mean, I've taken classes, I've actually taken college courses to get to where I'm at now. But all of a sudden something shifted. And when I decided that I'm going to own my voice and what I believe in, and if I don't know it, I'm going to do the research. I will let someone know I don't know, and I'm going to figure it out. Everything changed. The pressure went away.
Yeah.
In fact,
Yeah.
I'll never forget, we had there was one client it was a huge referral, and that was his very first thing. He goes, so tell me your degree, what's your background? And I said, I didn't go to college. And I never heard from him again.
Wow.
And that was the moment I'm like, it doesn't matter, he wasn't for us. That's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay. If people wanted letters behind my name, then I'm not the fit. There's other people. There's great other companies, but I'm going to attract our own people.
What about yours?
My experience with imposter syndrome was being put in a really high level leadership position at 18, feeling as though, as I look back now, that company was 100% wanting me to help weed all the people out that they did not want on the team anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy never gave a 5 on an interview, and for whatever reason, as an 18-year-old kid, I got a 5, which is the best score you can possibly get in interviews. So if you get a 5, you're pretty much guaranteed the position. And I remember like patting myself on the back, like, yes, I faked it, because I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea how to run operations or logistics for a massive retail brand. I don't know what I'm doing, but I can talk about it. And make sense to some degree. And I had a lot of life experience, to your point, Mary, as far as like growing up through it. But there was this deep desire from just being even a younger kid. And so I'm actually going to take the opposite approach. My imposter syndrome, as I've identified it and like really worked through it, really stemmed from this age of being in my early teens and wanting to be older, or constantly being told like, you have potential, you have potential, you have potential. And so, but I didn't really have anybody teach me how to live out what full potential looked like. And so for me, it was like, I got to just figure this out on my own. And I have all this potential, but how do I do it? And so I never wanted to let anybody down. I never wanted to fall short of what that potential, this like proverbial place was that I could be at, but that other people randomly saw in me. And so I just learned to live with it. And how that kind of produced itself was this insatiable desire to learn, read, understand, study. If I didn't know, I would just fake it. And then the immediate moment I would get out, I would research enough to know. And that was always my motto in life was, if I don't know, I will know very shortly after. And I don't ever want to be in a position of not knowing. And how that transpired through many different careers was really late nights, really hard seasons, countless hours of not fully being comfortable in my own skin, or even in at a leadership table, because it was always, what do I not know? And then it was always, in retrospect, the search for the no. And if I didn't know, that was the point where it got really uncomfortable. It's really the underlying, how it showed up in my life was different in every season, but it was that underlying, just constant stress of, to Eric, you said this earlier, like, am I enough? Will I ever be enough? How can I achieve? And when will I ever feel comfortable and just content? where I am, and I still struggle with it. I think turning 30 helped because it's like I'm no longer in my 20s. But
a baby.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You just turned 30.
No,
31.
God.
last year.
So it's
Yeah,
been
last year.
I'm like,
right.
wait.
It's been a while.
No, I'm 35, so he's 30. Yeah, 31.
Yeah, 31. And so I think turning 30 helped, but also just realizing like that is this, and it's slowly identifying itself, but just this underlying current that keeps back vulnerability, transparency, honesty, and it's kept relationships at bay at times. And it's just this underlying proverbial thing. And I just wanted to kind of throw that out there to say, like, if you're listening to this and you're struggling with it, we all are.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, whether we've weathered it and we're where you are, Eric, as a 70-year-old who no longer feels imposter syndrome, or we are as a chipper young 35-year-old Mary who is past it, or somewhere in the middle. Like, this is a journey we all walk. And if you don't know, and this is just something I challenge everybody with, if you don't think that you struggle with imposter syndrome, you probably have very limited self-awareness. And I say that with so much confidence because in our world, in our society that's knowledge-based, it is impossible, I believe fully and firmly, it's impossible to fully not feel that at some point.
Well, I think if you put yourself into positions that are challenging and you're doing things that you haven't done before, if you're not feeling that, then I'd agree with you. It's got to be some lack of awareness. But if you're not putting yourself into positions that are challenging or different or new, maybe it's possible. But I would agree with you. I think we all experience this in one way or another. Connor, what do you ever run into this? Like, what Connor's going to go, I've never felt this. I don't know what we're talking about.
Well, let's work on your self-awareness, Connor. I'm just kidding.
I mean, yeah, after that statement, I have to say yes.
That guy backed you into a corner there. Just kidding.
No,
when he's not Santa Claus, or he says he's Santa Claus.
That's it. He doesn't say Santa. Santa gets 1 or 2 gifts. That's it.
No, I mean, I think I struggled with it much earlier on in my career, but I think I was lucky enough early on to have mentors, both in and out of business. So through the church or just through friends or through businesses that spoke enough into me to give me the wherewithal and knowledge of how to battle it very early on. So I may get into those modes. Like Austin was saying, even now, like even in my job now at Driven, deal with it, but it doesn't settle. I don't let it settle on the shelf. It quickly gets wiped away, and I've developed just the mental actions to take to prevent it from taking root. And because my experience is that whenever it does take root, to be an imposter, I am mentally, physically, spiritually paralyzed.
Yeah.
And so because that's my reaction and response to it, and through processing it when I was younger, I realized I had to find tools to fight it, because otherwise I would be in the middle of an anatomy lab exam, locking my knees out, hoping to pass out so I could get out of this thing that I didn't think I was qualified for.
Wow.
So there were those extreme examples for me that I was like, well, this has to be nipped in the bud. And so that's kind of my experience where I still feel it now. But it's a very quickly recognizable thing for me so that I don't.
I just feel like Connor just schooled us all, and he's like, man, I've been working on this for years. I got it dialed in. I have a system, and when I feel it, I can overcome it. And so we should shift the entire podcast to Connor. What is your system, and how do you overcome it?
No, I want to hear that. I want to hear the data that you have pulled up, because I'm really curious what data there is around this.
Because Connor's system is most likely more accurate than that data.
I know. I'm like, feel free to counteract counteract whatever I found on the internet, Connor, because you have lived this.
Y'all are developing an imposter syndrome right now.
It's working.
I don't
It's
want to be
working.
the expert in
He's
this.
No,
like,
cool.
"Please,
So is the
please
first
don't
step of the
pass out."
system denial? Is that what it is? You don't get away from? No, just kidding.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay. So went through just looking at several websites and just kind of understanding this, and I don't just mean from the process of going through it, and we all know what it is and we've all experienced it, but I was like, okay, what really is this, and how does psychology take a look at this, and are there systems and ways to work through it? And came across a couple of really cool websites, but the one that stood out that I felt like had some really good stuff was helpguide.org. So it's a nonprofit, and it had a section on a very fairly detailed section on imposter, but it gets into 5 types of imposter syndrome. It's got the perfectionist, the superhuman, the natural genius, the soloist, and the expert. So I'll give it a little bit of background and kind of where it goes with it. So the perfectionist, and it says you set unrealistically high standards for yourself and sometimes other people as well. Anything short of perfection feels like failure. You tend to be overly critical of your performance and doubt the quality of your work. And
Hey, hold on. Can we play a game here? That's like, do you have this? Like within us. Like, do you see that within us?
Okay.
So I think that'd
All
just be
right.
fun.
All right. So perfectionist. Who feels perfectionist out of this group?
100%. There you go.
Yeah. No, I think Austin is big time. Just by
Oh,
the
okay.
facial.
No,
your facial expressions when Eric was reading it was like.
I was looking at you, Connor. I'm just kidding. You know.
So Connor, you don't really experience that one, or you do?
No, not as much.
Yeah, I'd say there's moments, but I don't feel like I do as much either.
Well, and where perfection comes up with me is especially when I'm teaching, that I better know what I'm teaching. I memorize, I study, I study, I live it, I go through the process. And I'll never forget, it was actually one of our first bold classes, and I'm doing a process and my mind went completely blank. And I knew the information, and I actually had my workbook, my manual was open and it was in front of me, but I was paralyzed and I could not for the life, like there was nothing there, which tied back into you're not enough. Who are you to teach this? Who are you to run a company? You have business owners yet, and I am. Whoo. And then all of a sudden something happened. I actually laughed at myself, and I'll never forget. I said brain fart in the middle of bold. Thank goodness it was the second day, and it came rushing back. But I crushed on myself so hard that I couldn't let it go. And to the fact that the next class, I was terrified. I did not want to take that process because I was afraid it was going to happen again.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I always just felt that if I made a mistake, then I'd be thrown away. Like my value is in the fact that I do not make mistakes, and that is what drove me to, if I don't know, I'm going to figure it out very quickly. But it manifested itself into, if I make a mistake, I will be thrown away. I'm not valuable to those relationships. I'm not valuable to those people. I'm not valuable to this company because my failure determines my value, or my inability to fail determines value. And so hyper anxiety, stress, all the things, but that has shown itself every time. So,
well, and that's one of those core, that was one of those core needs where we need to know that we're valued, that we're worth some, like seen, heard, have value. And our greatest fear is that we're not enough and we're not loved. And so when that perfection comes in, the fear is, well, if I make a mistake, then that proves I'm not enough, especially if we're younger, we've been disciplined, or we're not rewarded. It can tie into those underlying fears, which if you do not know who you are, and you can laugh at yourself and shake out like, whoa, whatever.
Yeah.
So I know what.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say in the mindset of being solution oriented for listeners in these. And you already hit on it. So maybe we can do that for the rest of these as we go through it. But what are the tools or processes or, mental models that you can employ to get yourself out of these whenever you're feeling these imposter, these 5 types?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. So what do you guys do? So when you're feeling those, how do you? Mary says brain fart, and apparently everything works. But like, what do you do when you
I think I mean what Mary hit on, where it was like laugh at yourself, bring a little bit more, like break that seal of if this isn't perfect, then I'm an imposter. And I think laughter is a really powerful tool in that, where it's like, okay, that's a dumb thought. Not everything has to be perfect, or if everything's not perfect, that doesn't mean that I'm a fraud. So I think laughter is a really cool one.
Yeah, I think within my journey of struggling through perfectionism, it is understanding and just identifying it as it's coming up, and being surrounded and having pre-conversations have been important. So Eric having the awareness and Mary having the awareness that I am that way. So when they give me feedback on a summit class or something that we're doing together, they're like, hey, what do you think went well? And here's all the areas where I failed and I struggled and I know I didn't do well.
Everything wasn't perfect.
Everything that wasn't perfect. Or, here's a list of, and it's not that I don't take feedback well, it's that those things I'm hyper aware of them because of that tendency. And so having the pre-conversations, having the vulnerability-based trust to go, hey, I know this is there. And then also communicating as I'm feeling it. So having the pre-conversations to set it all up, because when you're feeling that, if you haven't had the pre-conversations, it is really challenging in the moment to have that conversation. Yeah. Like if no one knows, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, I'm a perfectionist and this is really hard for me. But if you've had the pre-conversations, I'm able to say, hey, Connor, I'm really struggling with this having to be perfect, or feeling that I'm making a lot of mistakes, or hey, Mary, I'm struggling through this right now, and because of the pre-conversation, she identifies it and she's going, hey, I see this here. You can ask for help. Like, you can release that. Like, you don't have to put that on. Like, it's okay. And so I think doing the work, in basketball, when you're rebounding, they say, do your work early, box them out, push them back, get in position, do your work early. I think for me, the most success I've done is do the work early, because it's going to come and you're going to have those thoughts and feelings. But to your point, Connor, like, it's for it to not settle and not root. Communicate it early and often.
I have so many thoughts rolling through my head right now. And it's, perfection is the enemy of greatness, because when we get into it has to be perfect, we put so much stress and pressure on ourselves. And we talk about excellence, right? So what does excellence look like? Which gives you room for grace. And if you make a mistake, so laugh, but shake it off, because our mind, if you struggle with the perfectionism and you make the mistake and you replay the story over and over and over and over, it will paralyze you. So it is, what did I learn? What can I do? You can't change it. All right. So next time I'm going to visualize, I'm going to focus from the end in mind. Am I ready? Am I prepared? And if I fall down, you know what? Nobody knows. People do not know that maybe we made a mistake. They don't. Yeah. They don't. Ask for help. And one thing, when people come in, sorry, I'm on the roll. When and I tell that I actually just had a call and someone was saying that they were paralyzed because they're supposed to be the expert and they'd never seen it before. They'd never done it before. They were in an interview. And I said, well, in those moments, you do your research, but you ask a lot of questions. Eric taught me this. He goes, you don't have to know everything. And I think a lot of times as an expert, or you come in, that expert says, no, you need to know everything. Where the question becomes the answer. People already know different things. So if you're teaching or there's something going on, if you ask other people, if you ask them and you're not telling, I think a lot of times we get stuck because we think we have to know it all and we need to tell them.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I just want everyone out there to realize Mary and I, when we were first dating, I was managing her. Okay. I was her manager. And there is nothing like managing your girlfriend who is a perfectionist and giving her feedback.
Yeah, it didn't go very well.
You know, That went.
We're
it
still
went
together though.
I
Awesome.
was gonna
It
say
really
it
did.
went, it went fairly well. I mean,
Oh,
Well,
there
there-
were times it didn't.
But anyway, okay. So moving on. Second psychological way of looking at this imposter syndrome is they call it the superhuman. So unlike a perfectionist who may feel satisfied if they can meet high standards in one specific area, you expect to master multiple roles. Your focus is on how many things you can handle. So you tend to take on excessive responsibilities and overextend yourself in the process. So who feels that one ever? I actually
I take on a lot, but I can own when I don't know it. I'm like, I'm not the expert here.
I mean, I think about this often, not that it was imposter syndrome or connected to it, but man, I'm doing 85 things all at the same time. And so that's a good one for me.
Yeah, I mean, this has always been a big one. I mean, I think it's I'm trying to think. I'm thinking through the words to say. I don't want to bring.
I like this one. Like, we've stumped Connor. I didn't know that was a thing.
You got him talking about himself.
Yeah, I know. He's like, he's in there and he's like, what do I really feel? Do I feel? I don't know what's happening.
I mean, that's pretty accurate. Yeah. No, I mean, I think this has just been a chronic one for me, both in business and then also just in the home as well. Like, if I'm not doing 7 different jobs on the weekend for my wife and kids and household, then I am failing, like tying my worth up into those things. So, but I think a big solution for me over the years has literally just been, the Eisenhower matrix, which I think we've talked about, but it's getting out of my head of, and I just said this the other day, if everything's important, nothing's important. So I had to really dial in of like, okay, well, first of all, sever the connection of these tasks aren't my worth. So we're good there. But then also, like, I do need to still do something. I can't just let go of the important things. So, but putting priorities behind them and saying, these things are urgent, these things are important, not urgent, not important. So that's how I have been able to detach myself from that mindset.
Yeah, I still struggle with it. I think for Eric's point, like, I haven't ever put this box in of like, oh, your tendency to overcompensate and to just take everything on out of really wanting to serve, help, and everything else could be rooted in imposter syndrome. It also could not be. And I just want to like caveat that out there. Like, this is a type of imposter syndrome. I agree with you, psychology today. I agree with the psychiatrist who wrote this list. However, I do think that it can be rooted in other things. I think it can be rooted in insecurity of your work environment. And I think it can be increased by that or decreased by that, because there's been seasons where I've really struggled hard with that. And there's other seasons where I have not. When in different businesses or different life scenarios, I was really bought into what this goal was that I wanted to achieve. And it led me to take everything on and do it and be it. And it was a part of my role in that season. Even as I reflect, I'm going, it wasn't necessarily because my worth was tied into it. I just wanted to do it.
I think this one is specifically how I would delineate it is, if you're saying, if I'm not busy, people won't see me as
Valuable,
the important leader, the director. Like, I have to have all this stuff going on so that I am valued as a leader in my company. And I think that's where the imposter piece comes in for this.
I was just rereading the statement there, and it's, you focus on how many things you can handle and you take on excessive responsibility or overextend yourself. So it's like, if I'm feeling like I'm not doing enough, so I go pick up more things. Because if I'm not doing enough, then I'm not fulfilling my full value or whatever, and I feel like an imposter, and I'm not. So it is a little different than just doing multiple things. I guess I read it a little different in the beginning, but
so is that also where people they feel so needed and valued when someone's saying, hey, Eric, could you help me here? And so you pick it up, or Austin, can you pick up this? Hey, Austin, we have something else for you to do. And so that superhuman's like, yeah, I can take it. I can do it. I can do it.
Yeah.
And
the ones
you're
that
so
don't
afraid
say
to say no. Right.
Yeah, they're not saying no.
Because there's a fear of
Right.
being seen as
not being able to do
imposter
it.
if you
Yeah.
can't say yes.
Yeah, so I'm sure I experienced this, but I wouldn't say it's as prevalent for me. I am giddy about problem solving and making things run, and I like find myself in 100 different things all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that I'm doing it for those reasons. But anyway, we'll keep going. I'm sure some of these are going to hit me here shortly.
Well, and I will say this, like, just to say that my hand still's up in that. I just wanted to kind of cast that delineation because I believe it's important. So not everyone who's, slightly overachieving is like, I've been living an imposter,
Yeah.
I don't want to cause anybody stress there, but if you look at it, and I think this is the delineation, if you're looking at it and going, I'm taking all these things on because I find my value and worth in the work I'm doing, chances are you're struggling with this. And I have in the past in that role. I think especially early on in my career, it was, I have to prove that I can do all of these things. And at the moment I can't, just like the perfectionism, and the moment I make a mistake, and the moment I can't, it's not enough. So what I'm really saying is I'm really screwed up mentally. So there's that.
I would almost
and book a training with Austin today.
Right.
You were screwed up mentally.
Yeah.
All right, doing the next one here.
Okay.
Let's go into it.
The Natural Genius.
For
If I
sure.
just give
I
it the
think,
title, anyway.
Yeah, I identify with this one pretty heavily.
It's difficult for you, isn't it, Connor?
Been
Okay.
described as this before.
All right. It says, as well as setting unrealistically high expectations, you also judge yourself on speed and how easily you complete the task. Your thinking might be, I'm naturally talented, so I should be able to excel without effort or much coaching. You can feel frustrated when dealing with tasks that involve patiently honing your skills and learning through multiple failures. I'm raising my hand on this one.
Oh, not
Austin
me
has
at
to,
all.
right? Yeah, I feel like this has come up so much.
No, this nails me. Like, I just feel like I'm supposed to like be able to figure it out in 5 seconds. And
I see this with a lot of athletes.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
so
And that's where I've seen it the most in Austin. Less in like some in business stuff, but more in like if you can't figure out a game or something else very quickly. He's like, this is stupid. I just don't.
So
want to
my dad was he was an engineer and an architect, and he was just like his expectation, and that whole side of my family, the whole McGrath side of my family, some brilliant people. I mean, they just are. There's a lot of them run companies, or they're doctors, or they're just extremely successful. And there's a value that's cascaded through the generations of the expectation is you step into something, you can figure it out on the spot, and you're smart enough to do it, right? And that's kind of rewarded. We'd play board games. I remember one year we're playing. I wasn't old enough yet, but the family is playing Risk. If you've ever played the board game Risk, right? And someone did something. It was a bad move. Died, in the game. Got killed or whatever. Apparently, from that moment on, everyone was leaving and going home for Christmas, and they weren't going to spend Christmas together because one side, the move was so stupid that I can't believe it happened. And on the other side, I think they gloated over how stupid the move was. And all of a sudden, everybody, like,
wow,
that was where it was. So,
welcome to the holidays at the McGrath house.
We had great holidays too. But bottom line, everybody did not leave, but they pulled it back together. But the long and the short of it is that right there absolutely is an expected value within that side of my family.
Because I think and again, to tie it back, because these in my brain, like they're getting conflated, like, as we talk about them, where it's not just where you feel like you're not smart. This is where if like the imposter piece comes in, where you start having the mindset of, well, if I was really talented, this wouldn't be hard for me. And
right.
That's where the imposter hat comes in. Where you start, believing these false things of like, well, if I was,
it's bullshit. It's an unrealistic expectation.
We see that so much with the athletes, especially when they're younger and they just crush it and they do so well, and then they play higher level, they get into college
When it gets
and they're
hard.
not starting and it's hard, and now
Mhm.
everything starts to crush in on them because they should be here. Why should I have to do the extra work? Why, and it's like that one to me just goes, "Ooh, I can see different people who show up there."
I still remember we were at, and I won't give the school or any of that, but we were at a tennis tournament, watching one of the sports teams that we worked with. It was a tennis team, very top 5 school, like high profile, killing it school, big name. And we're out there, and one of the kids makes a mistake. One of the players, they make a mistake, and it's a big point, and something goes wrong. And the dad, I'll never forget it. Dad screams out from the sideline, "I spent over $1 million on you. You better play better," or something along. Like, he was just like, part I remember is, "I spent $1 million on you," right? And he's saying, I've invested all of it's supposed to produce a payout of, I've put all this money and all this stuff in you, and the expectation is you are a natural genius at this point, even though it's not natural, but it's like that you're an expert. And when he's not an expert, and by the way, he crashed out so hard, not just there, he kind of crashed out for the rest of the season, because it was just like, you put all that expectation, that imposter kicks in, and you're consumed by doubt, anxiety, stress, and pressure, and he couldn't get out of it.
One of the ways that, and just to kind of bring it solution oriented on this, was one of the ways I've combated this in myself, because this is absolutely present in me in a lot of ways. Like I think, to your point, Connor, more personally, more when I've dealt with sports, but I find it's there. The thought will come up at times, is like, why is this so hard for me? This should be easier for me. And I've said that, I think, to every one of you on this call, like, this should be simpler. Or if you find yourself not knowing if you struggle with this, or where that line of conflation is, I would ask, do you oversimplify your effort? And do you oversimplify the complexity of a task? If you do, I would say you most likely struggled with this imposter syndrome, because that's what we do. Is I'll do the work really late, or I'll do the work, it'll take me way longer than I expect it to take, but I'll say it took me less time than it actually took, because I don't want to say it took me that long, because it shouldn't take me that long. And so I would challenge you, and also the solution here is just to be honest. Don't oversimplify for the sake of what you feel like you should or should not have. Be honest around the expectations of yourself, and be honest about not only your personal capacity, but the situational capacity. And I think that's one thing that I realized, I guess it was about 5 years ago. Just because I can do it doesn't mean I should do it. And just because I don't do it doesn't mean I can't do it. And this idea that says, okay, I can choose how I'm going to live and breathe and make decisions. And if it's hard and I have to fight through the hard, or it's easy and it just happens to be easy for me, regardless of that paradigm or dichotomy there, like, it's not indicative of your value, your worth, or your potential, or your ability. It is simply just what it is. It's situational. And sometimes it should be easier for you, but you're in a situation where it makes it impossible to have freedom of thought. I'm just saying this, like, personally going through a lot right now. And me and Eric have multiple conversations. It's like, well, that shouldn't take me as long, but you're going through all this stuff you're going through. We have to be aware of that.
So for the sake of time, I think we're going to save the other two and final thoughts for imposter syndrome. But I mean, as we finish up part one here, anything you want to leave people with that are resonating with any or all of these so far?
Actually, as we're going through these first three and imposter syndrome as a whole, the book Mindset by Carol Dweck just keeps rolling in me, fix versus growth. And I really believe that when you understand, because a lot of times I believe that the imposter syndrome and how we deal with it, we end up more in the fixed mindset. And how we can work through it is to look at the growth mindset, which will give us a different ideas, the way we handle things, instead of, oh my gosh, I should be perfect, I should know this. Okay, so I am good at this. What are the other things I can do to learn and grow?
Mhm.
How can I use it as a lesson to be better, moving forward? So looking for the lesson versus the problem.
Yeah.
I was thinking over and telling you a little bit about my family. There was a shift somewhere along the way, and the moment that sticks out in my head for this shift. So the shift is walking away. How to deal with imposter syndrome for me was to go start making a lot of mistakes.
Mm.
It was actually because what there was a certain point in my life where I was like, I got to do it right. I got to do it right because, and I give you a little history of the background. It's like, I'm supposed to be able to figure this stuff out. I'm supposed to, and all these things are supposed to, and I was making mistakes, but I wasn't pushing for mistakes. I wasn't like learning how to make mistakes, learn how to fail and be okay with it. Right. And actually the answer to that is not like make less. The answer to that is really make more, a lot more. And I'm not, the ones that are in your control and you're making poor decisions, that's one thing. I'm talking about, wow, I got to go up and give a board presentation. Well, do your best to plan and do your best to go at it. And it's not going to be perfect, and let go of the expectations and walk in. Well, everybody's like, well, that sounds great, but how do I do that? You do it a bunch.
Yeah.
You do it a bunch, and you screw it up a bunch. But I remember I was sitting in a training, and I was learning to train classes like Bold. Okay. I'm sitting there and I'm in a training. I've got somebody teach me how to teach and be a facilitator of emotional-based learning, which is what Bold is, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sitting in there and I'm learning, and we're sitting in a process, and somebody's supposed to stand up, make a statement, and go through and do some things. And I'm sitting with this guy. His name is Dean Catrice. Love this guy. He's an amazing facilitator. Owns his own company. I think it's Power Promotions. There's his little plug. He does all these things for casinos and all these things.
Yeah.
But at that time he was just a trainer. And I'm like, oh my God. I like whispered to him because it was kind of quiet. I whispered. I'm like, what are we gonna do? Because the guy wasn't getting up. The guy was like, I'm not doing that. And he goes, I don't know. Let's find out. And I'll never forget it because I'm like sitting there. It's this big moment in training. And I'm like, oh my God, it's all going to fall apart. What's going to happen?
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know. And he goes to him, he goes, what's going on? And the guy's like, whatever he said. And I was like, huh. Yeah. I don't even know what he said. He's just like, he's asking him questions. It was the most casual conversation. Finished up with the conversation. The guy got up and did it, and everything was fine, and it was not a big deal. And I remember going to him afterwards. I'm like, how are you so calm? And he's like, I don't know. What was the worst thing that could happen? You just didn't do it. And I don't know. It released me somewhere along the way. It was this little moment, and I was like, okay, I got to go screw some stuff up. Yeah. So that was my solution. That may not be yours, but for me on this, go screw some shit up. Let's see what happens.
I like that. What a fantastic note to end on.
Right on.
Well, be on the lookout for part 2. Will be out next week, everybody. We'll come back with those final 2 and final thoughts with everybody. So until then, thanks for listening, and thanks.
Go screw some shit up.
It's our next t-shirt. See you next week, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.